The blast door quivered under the relentless assault, each impact reverberating through the narrow corridor like a seismic tremor. Jackson Cade slammed his back against the cold steel, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he fumbled with the shards of his shattered helmet. He glanced at the jagged edges, useless now on Mars with the air containment compromised. He had minutes, maybe less, if he couldn't find a way to seal it. The thin Martian atmosphere wasn't forgiving, and neither were the mercenaries pounding their way towards him. Damn it, Jackson, think, he muttered to himself, scanning the corridor with desperate eyes. The alarms blared a shrill warning, the red emergency lights casting a hellish glow over the chaos. He could hear the mechanical whirring of drones approaching, drawn by the noise and the breach. He ducked into an alcove as a drone swept past, its sensors focused on the damaged section of the blast door. The quarantine zone was meant to keep things in, not out, and the presence of mercenaries here was as much a shock as the sudden attack. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat a countdown to a possible death sentence. Jackson fumbled in his utility belt, pulling out a roll of industrial tape, his last hope at patching the breach. If he could just... A deafening crash resounded as the blast door finally gave way, a wave of explosive decompression sweeping down the corridor. Jackson threw himself flat against the floor, holding his breath and praying to any deity that might be listening. The roar of ripping air was a banshee scream in his ears, and then it was gone, a thin, eerie silence replacing it. He risked a glance around the corner. Through the smoke and debris, he saw them. The mercenaries in their sleek, black suits, each one a testament to military precision and lethality. They moved like a well-oiled machine, scanning, advancing, weapons at the ready. Jackson felt the cold grip of fear tighten around his chest. His hand trembled as he applied the tape to his helmet, sealing the breach as best he could. It wasn't perfect, but it would hold for now. He pushed himself up, his mind racing. The trial. The thought blazed through his consciousness, the urgency of it a beacon in the chaos. He was the only one who could testify, the only one who had seen the exchange that could topple an empire. And someone clearly wanted to make sure he never got the chance. Jackson darted back into the corridor, keeping low, his eyes fixed on the exit at the far end. Every step was agonizingly slow, every breath a calculated risk. He could hear the mercenaries behind him, their tactical chatter over comms, a low hum punctuated by the clank of boots on steel. A door to his right hissed open, and Jackson froze, his pulse skyrocketing. He spun to face the threat, only to find a familiar face staring back at him. Lara, his voice cracked with disbelief. Jackson, get in here, Lara hissed, pulling him into the room and sealing the door behind them. Jackson stumbled back, catching himself on a console. The room was a makeshift control center, screens displaying the chaos outside and the status of the quarantine zone. What the hell is going on? Jackson demanded, struggling to catch his breath. Lara, her face etched with determination and fear, turned to him. They found out, Jackson. They know what you have, what you saw. They're trying to silence you before you can testify. Jackson's mind raced. The datapad in his pocket felt like a lead weight. The evidence it contained the key to a galactic scandal that could bring regime change. How did they find me? I covered my tracks. Lara shook her head, her short hair whipping around her face. Doesn't matter now. We need to get you off this rock before they kill us both. A sudden jolt rocked the room, and both of them staggered. The mercenaries were breaching the inner sanctum of the quarantine zone, their determination as relentless as the Martian storm brewing outside. Jackson looked at Lara, seeing the resolve in her eyes. What's the plan? She pulled up a schematic on the screen, highlighting a hidden corridor that led to an old service bay. There's a shuttle, barely space-worthy, but it'll get you to the nearest relay station. From there, you can transmit the data. He nodded, understanding the stakes. And you, I'll cover your escape. Someone has to distract them long enough for you to get out. No, Lara, I won't leave you here to. You don't have a choice. Jackson, she snapped, her eyes fierce. This is bigger than both of us. You have to get that evidence to the tribunal. It's the only way to stop them." Jackson felt the weight of her words, the truth of them. He nodded, the resolve settling in his bones. "All right, let's do this." They moved quickly, pulling on tactical gear and arming themselves with whatever weapons they could scavenge. The building shuddered under another impact, and Jackson knew time was slipping away like sand through his fingers. The hidden corridor was narrow, barely wide enough for them to move side by side. Jackson led the way, his heart pounding in his chest as he listened for any sign of pursuit. They reached the service bay, the shuttle a battered relic of a bygone era, but functional. Jackson hesitated, turning back to Lara. "Thank you," he said, the words thick with emotion. Lara smiled, a sad, fleeting thing. "Just make it count, Jackson." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the corridor, the mercenaries closing in. Jackson climbed into the shuttle, sealing the hatch behind him. The engines roared to life, a guttural sound that reverberated through the bay. As the shuttle lifted off, Jackson caught a final glimpse of Lara, her weapon raised, determination etched in every line of her body. Then she was gone, swallowed by the chaos as the shuttle blasted into the stormy Martian sky. The shuttle rattled and shook, the controls sluggish under Jackson's hands. He fought to keep it steady as it punched through the atmosphere, the red dust swirling around like a maelstrom. The relay station loomed ahead, a beacon of hope amidst the desolation. A warning light blinked on the console, and Jackson's heart skipped a beat. A missile lock. The mercenaries were persistent, their resolve as ironclad as their orders. He veered sharply, the shuttle groaning under the strain, but the missile tracked him with unerring precision. Jackson's mind raced, options dwindling. He couldn't outrun it, not in this relic. He glanced at the control panel, his eyes falling on the emergency beacon. A desperate plan formed, a gamble as risky as it was necessary. He activated the beacon, setting it to broadcast on all frequencies. It was a distress signal, one that would draw attention from every corner of the quadrant. He prayed it would be enough. The missile closed in, its trajectory unwavering. Jackson triggered the shuttle's escape pod, feeling the violent jolt as it ejected him into the void. He watched as the missile struck the shuttle, a brilliant explosion that lit up the Martian sky like a second sun. The escape pod hurtled towards the relay station, and Jackson braced himself, the impact a bone-jarring shock that rattled his teeth. He was alive, for now, but the mercenaries wouldn't stop. They'd come for him, relentless in their mission to ensure he never reached the tribunal. He climbed from the wreckage, his body protesting every movement. The relay station loomed ahead, a stark monolith against the crimson landscape. Jackson staggered towards it, each step a testament to his resolve. He reached the entrance, the doors sliding open with a hiss of compressed air. The station was deserted, the silence oppressive. Jackson made his way to the control center, his fingers flying over the console as he initiated the transmission sequence. The datapad felt heavy in his hands, the weight of its contents a reminder of the stakes. He connected it to the terminal, watching as the data uploaded, each percentage a step closer to the truth being known. A noise behind him made him spin, his heart leaping into his throat. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the harsh lights. Jackson's hand went to his weapon, instincts honed by years of conflict. But the figure stepped into the light, and Jackson's breath caught. It was Lara, battered and bruised but alive. Relief surged through him, an emotion so strong it left him reeling. "Lara," he breathed, his voice a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. She nodded, a grim smile on her lips. "They didn't get me, not yet." The console beeped, the transmission complete. Jackson turned back to it, watching as the data streamed into the ether, a beacon of hope for a galaxy on the brink. But their victory was short-lived. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the station, the mercenaries relentless in their pursuit. Jackson and Lara exchanged a glance, understanding passing between them. They had bought time, but their fight wasn't over. The tribunal would have the evidence, but it was up to them to ensure it reached the right hands. The mercenaries wouldn't stop until they were silenced, and the stakes were too high to fail. Jackson gripped his weapon, determination stealing his resolve. Lara stepped beside him, her presence a comforting weight against the darkness. They faced the approaching threat together, a united front against the encroaching storm. The battle wasn't over, but they had taken the first step towards victory. And Jackson Cade was a survivor. He would see this through, no matter the cost. As the mercenaries closed in, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Humanity wouldn't go down without a fight. The air inside the cramped cargo bay of the Starhound was thick with tension. The mercenaries, hardened veterans of countless skirmishes, were silent as their commander, Captain Elise Carter, reviewed the mission parameters once more. The holographic display projected above the table flickered, showing a rotating model of the asteroid station, their target. It was a makeshift fortress, bristling with automated defenses and patrolled by a militia of mercenaries not unlike themselves, but loyal to a different, more sinister cause. Carter's voice was steady. Intel confirms that the station's central core contains a prototype weapon capable of unleashing a gravitational wave that could destabilize entire planetary systems. If the Syndicate gets this operational, they won't just hold this sector hostage, they'll control it. Sergeant Mark Bear Reynolds, a massive figure with a face carved from stone, crossed his arms. And they know we're coming. What's the plan for that? Carter's eyes flickered over her team, gauging their readiness. They were a motley crew, an amalgamation of skills and backgrounds, but each one was the best at what they did. Their survival depended on it. We'll split into two teams. Alpha takes the control center to disable the station's defenses. Bravo moves on the core to secure the weapon. We'll need speed and precision, two things we're damn good at. Jax Hale, the team's tech specialist, tapped a sequence into his wrist console. His fingers moved with a nervous energy, eyes darting to the display. I've managed to get us a short window to bypass the outer shields, but it's tight. Once we're in, every alarm on that rock will blare. We need to move fast. Reynolds grunted, his voice a low rumble. Then let's not keep them waiting. The Starhound dropped out of lightspeed, the asteroid looming ahead, a dark blot against the backdrop of stars. The ship shuddered as it entered the station's sensor range, the hum of its engines underscoring the urgency of their mission. The mercenaries moved with practiced efficiency, securing weapons and gear, their expressions grim but resolute. As they approached the hangar bay, the ship's auto turrets barked in response to the first salvo of defensive fire. Carter's voice crackled over the intercom. Brace for impact. Landing's going to be rough. The Starhound careened into the bay, skidding to a halt amid a shower of sparks. The rear ramp dropped, and the team poured out, weapons at the ready. The hangar was a chaos of sound and movement, enemy combatants already converging on their position. Alpha, with me, Carter shouted, signaling Reynolds and Jax to follow. Bravo, secure the core. The teams split, moving with lethal efficiency. Carter's group cut through the opposition, Reynolds' heavy repeater barking death in concise bursts, while Jax's drone provided a mobile shield. The corridors of the station were a labyrinth of metal and shadow, but they had studied every inch of it. Hostiles coming up on right flank, Jax warned, his drone's sensors lighting up with movement. Reynolds was already pivoting, the repeater spitting fire as he covered their right. An explosion from a grenade lobbed by enemy forces shook the corridor, but the team pressed on, relentless. Meanwhile, Bravo team, led by Lieutenant Samara Voss, moved with a fluid grace. Voss was a strategist, her decisions calculated and her aim unerring. Her team danced through the enemy fire, returning it with mechanical precision. The core chamber loomed ahead, a massive structure of reinforced alloy, the humming power source at its center. Cover me, Voss ordered, her eyes locked on the control panel across the room. Her squad formed a defensive perimeter, trading fire with entrenched defenders. As Voss reached the console, Her fingers flew over the controls, working to interface with the station's systems. The seconds stretched into eternity, each heartbeat underscored by the sound of gunfire and the acrid tang of smoke. Back with Carter's team, they reached the control center, the nerve hub of the station. Carter dropped to one knee, firing methodically at the entrenched guards. "Jax, get those defenses down." Jax slid into cover beside the terminal, his hands a blur as he hacked into the system. "Almost there," he muttered, ignoring the sweat dripping into his eyes. The station's defenses were a web of encryption and countermeasures, but he was one of the best at what he did. "Got it," he exclaimed, as the lights flickered and the automated turrets fell silent, their threat neutralized. Carter nodded, rising to her feet. "Let's regroup with Bravo." As the two teams converged on the core chamber, the first real sign of trouble hit them. The station's PA system crackled to life, the voice of the Syndicate's leader, a shadowy figure known only as Reyes, echoing through the halls. "Mercenaries, you are trespassing on Syndicate territory. Your actions are futile. Surrender now, and I might consider mercy." Carter's jaw set in defiance. "Keep moving," she ordered, her resolve hardening. The Syndicate's forces were closing in, and they had no time to lose. The core chamber was a whirlwind of activity. Boss and her team were pinned down by a fresh wave of Syndicate soldiers, their numbers seemingly endless. Carter's group joined the fray, the combined firepower slowly turning the tide. But it was then that Reyes revealed his hand. The chamber shuddered violently, the very structure of the station groaning under the stress. Jax's console lit up with warnings. "He's activating the weapon. We have minutes, maybe less." Carter's heart pounded in her chest. "Can you stop it?" she asked, urgency sharpening her voice. "It's not just a switch. I need time to override the fail-safes," Jax replied, his voice tight with concentration. "Then we hold the line," Carter commanded, her eyes meeting Voss's. It was a silent understanding, a shared determination to see the mission through, no matter the cost. The Syndicate forces renewed their assault with a desperate ferocity, as if sensing the stakes. The mercenaries fought with a grim tenacity, each one aware that failure meant annihilation not just for them, but potentially for entire worlds. Reynolds took point, his repeater a constant roar as he held back the tide. His presence was a bulwark, unyielding and resolute. Beside him, Boss moved with lethal grace, every shot precise, her focus unwavering. The seconds ticked by, each one an eternity. Jax worked feverishly, his mind a blur of calculations and code. "Almost there," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. And then, abruptly, the station shuddered again, a deeper, more ominous tremor. Jax's eyes widened in horror. Reyes isn't just activating the weapon. He's set it to self-destruct. Panic threatened to break the team, but Carter's voice cut through the chaos, a lifeline of command and clarity. "Jax, you need to shut it down. Boss, find us an exit route. We have to get off this station before it takes us with it." The core's burgeoning energy cast an eerie glow, highlighting the mercenaries' determined faces as they fought on, every action a testament to their resolve. "Come on, Jax," Reynolds growled, his voice a mix of frustration and encouragement. "I'm trying," Jax snapped, his hands never slowing. The console beeped angrily, fighting him every step of the way. Boss was already at the secondary terminal, her mind racing to bypass the lockdown protocols. "There's an emergency evacuation route, but we'll need to move fast." Carter nodded, her decision made. "We hold here until Jax gives the word. Boss, as soon as he does, get us out." The station's internal alarms blared, warning of imminent destruction. The Syndicate forces, sensing the end, fought with a suicidal fervor. The mercenaries were outnumbered, but they fought with the desperation of those who knew there was no going back. Then, with a triumphant shout, Jax's console lit up green. "Got it." Weapon and self-destruct shut down. The victory was short-lived. As the realization struck the Syndicate forces, their fire intensified, a last-ditch effort to take the mercenaries with them. Carter gave the order, her voice cutting through the tumult. Fall back, boss. Lead the way. The mercenaries moved, a disciplined retreat under withering fire. The corridors were a gauntlet, the path to the evacuation route fraught with danger. As they neared the hangar, a deafening explosion rocked the station. A breach, massive and close. Carter's heart sank as she realized their path was blocked. The hangar bay, their only escape, was now a twisted wreckage of fire and debris. "We're cut off," Boss shouted, panic threading her voice. Carter's mind raced, searching for solutions in a rapidly closing vice. "Options, Jax. There's another bay," Jax replied, his voice strained. "But it's on the far side. No time to reach it." The reality of their situation crashed over them like a tidal wave. They were trapped, with the station crumbling around them. Carter's resolve hardened, a steely determination taking hold. "We make for the auxiliary shuttle pods. It's our only chance." The team moved as one, urgency propelling them through the quaking corridors. The shuttle pods were their last hope, but each step was a gamble, the structure groaning ominously as they raced against time. Reynolds brought up the rear, his repeater barking in defiance as the syndicate forces pressed their attack. "Go, damn it." They reached the pods, the tiny vessels their salvation, but it was too late. The station shuddered violently, and the lights flickered as the artificial gravity failed. Debris and bodies floated, the scene a surreal nightmare. "Get in," Carter ordered, her voice fierce. The team scrambled into the pods, sealing the hatches as the station's final death throes began. The pods launched into the void, propelled by emergency thrusters. Carter watched through the viewport as the station imploded, a silent, cataclysmic end to all their efforts. They had survived, but the victory was hollow. The syndicate had been stopped, but at what cost? The team was adrift, their mission complete but their fate uncertain. The stars stretched endlessly around them, a cold reminder of the vast, unforgiving universe. Carter leaned back in her seat, the adrenaline fading, leaving only exhaustion and a spark of determination. "We survived," she whispered, a vow to herself and her team. "And we'll make it home." The pods drifted, a fragile hope against the void, but for now, it was enough. They had faced the darkness and emerged, scarred but unbroken. The universe was vast, but humanity was tenacious. And sometimes, that was all that mattered. The metallic hum of the containment cell resonated in the background, an ominous reminder of the gravity of their mission. Captain Elias Voss stood in the dimly lit corridor, his eyes tracing the transparent barrier that separated him from the lone human witness, the linchpin of the trial that threatened to unravel the precarious tapestry of intergalactic relations. The witness, a disheveled figure with weary eyes, sat hunched over on the narrow bench, the weight of the galaxy's expectations bearing down on his shoulders. His name was Samuel Thorne, an unassuming human who had inadvertently become the keystone in a case that could shatter a fragile peace among the galactic factions. His testimony held the power to either expose the criminal networks operating in the shadows or plunge the known cosmos into chaos. Elias sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "This is more than we signed up for," he murmured, glancing at his second-in-command, Lieutenant Mara Jensen. Her sharp eyes surveyed the room with the practiced wariness of a veteran, her fingers drumming a silent rhythm against her thigh. "We knew it wouldn't be simple," Mara replied, her voice steady despite the uncertainty of their predicament. "But our orders are clear. We need to get Thorne to the tribunal in one piece." Elias nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. The odds were stacked against them. The mercenary detachment was a small cog in a vast galactic machine, and the forces arrayed against them were formidable. The Draker Syndicate, a shadowy organization with deep ties to the criminal underworld, had already sent assassins to silence Thorne. And now, whispers of an impending attack on their convoy reached their ears, a chilling reminder of the enemies lurking in the void. "Captain," Mara said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "I've intercepted communications suggesting the Draker have hired a battalion of Xylith enforcers. They're setting up an ambush at the Andromeda Rift." Elias cursed under his breath. The Xylith were ruthless, their advanced technology and brutal tactics making them a force to be reckoned with. We can't outrun them, he said, his mind racing for a solution. Our only chance is to outsmart them. Mara raised an eyebrow. With respect, sir, outsmarting an entire battalion isn't exactly an easy feat. Perhaps not, Elias conceded, but we have to try. Thorn's testimony could bring down the syndicate. We can't let them win. Their conversation was interrupted by a crackle over the comms. Captain, we have a situation, came the voice of Chief Engineer Lien Chen, the urgency in her tone palpable. The hyperdrive is malfunctioning. We can't jump until it's fixed. Of course it is, Elias muttered, his frustration mounting. What's the damage, Lien? Looks like a sabotage job, Lien replied, her voice grim. Someone's been tampering with the systems. It'll take me a few hours to get us back online. Elias exchanged a look with Mara. We don't have hours, he said, the reality of their precarious position sinking in. We need to hold them off until the repairs are complete. Mara's expression hardened, a fiery determination in her eyes. We'll do what we have to, sir. We're not going down without a fight. Elias nodded, drawing strength from her resolve. He turned to the rest of the crew, their faces a mix of fear and defiance. They were a motley group, thrown together by circumstance, but they had one thing in common. They were human, and their tenacity was their greatest weapon. Listen up, Elias said, his voice cutting through the tension. We're about to face impossible odds, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's that humans have a knack for surviving the impossible. We need to buy Lien time to fix the hyperdrive. That means digging in and holding out. The crew nodded, determination etched into their faces. They were ready to face whatever came their way, even if it meant staring down the barrel of certain death. Elias took a deep breath, steeling himself for the battle ahead. As he turned back to the containment cell, he locked eyes with Thorn. The witness was a man burdened by the weight of knowledge, his every move shadowed by the specter of betrayal. Yet, there was a flicker of something else there, a hint of resilience that Elias hoped would be enough. Thorn, Elias said, his voice steady. We need you to hold on a little longer. Your testimony could change everything. Thorn met his gaze, a glimmer of resolve in his tired eyes. I didn't ask for this, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I won't let them win. Not after everything I've seen. With those words, the crew set to work, each member driven by the knowledge that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. As they braced themselves for the oncoming storm, the shadow of the Draker Syndicate loomed ever larger, a chilling reminder of the challenges they faced. The corridors of the ship buzzed with activity as preparations for the impending conflict reached fever pitch. Elias moved with purpose, coordinating the defense efforts while his mind raced with contingency plans. Mara took charge of the tactical teams, her sharp commands cutting through the air as she directed the crew into position. In the engineering bay, Lien worked tirelessly, her hands a blur as she pieced together the intricate web of the hyperdrive's circuitry. Sweat trickled down her brow, but her focus never wavered. She was the ship's lifeline, and time was her enemy. Elias checked his comms, the static echoing in the silence. Mara, status report. We're as ready as we'll ever be, Mara replied, her voice unwavering. Perimeter defenses are set, and the crew is on standby. We're ready to hold until Lien gives us the green light. Elias nodded, though a knot of anxiety twisted in his gut. Every second counted, and the clock was ticking. He turned his attention to the viewport, the stars beyond a silent testament to the vastness of their struggle. In that moment, he felt the weight of his responsibility, the lives of his crew resting in his hands. As the minutes dragged on, the tension in the air grew palpable. Elias could feel the anticipation building, a crescendo of fear and resolve that threatened to overwhelm even the most seasoned among them. But beneath the surface, a current of hope remained, a belief in the resilience that defined them as humans. Then, without warning, the ship's sensors blared to life, a cacophony of alarms that shattered the silence. Elias spun toward the control console, his heart pounding in his chest. "They're here," Mara said, her voice taut with urgency. "Xylith vessels incoming. They've sprung the trap." Elias felt a cold sweat break out across his skin. The Xylith ships emerged from the void like predators, their sleek forms cutting through the darkness with lethal grace. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched, yet they had no choice but to face the storm head-on. "All hands, battle stations," Elias commanded, his voice firm even as doubt clawed at him. "We hold the line." The ship shuddered as the first salvo of enemy fire peppered the hull, the impact resonating through the metal like a death knell. Elias gripped the console, his mind racing as he coordinated the defensive maneuvers. The crew responded with grim determination, each member acutely aware of the stakes. As the battle raged, the ship became a maelstrom of chaos and violence. Explosions rocked the corridors, and the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. Yet, amidst the turmoil, Elias felt a strange clarity, a focus that honed his senses to a razor edge. He could see the faces of his crew, etched with fear yet lit with a fierce resolve. They were fighting for more than just survival. They were fighting for a future where their voices could be heard, where the truth could prevail. Mara's voice cut through the din, a lifeline amidst the chaos. "Captain, we're holding, but we can't take much more of this. We need that hyperdrive online, and fast." Elias nodded, his thoughts racing as he considered their dwindling options. "Lien, status report," he barked into the comms, his voice tinged with desperation. "Almost there," Lien replied, her voice strained with exertion. "Just a few more minutes." Minutes they might not have. Elias clenched his fists, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. They were so close, yet the odds seemed insurmountable. As the battle reached a fever pitch, Elias felt the weight of hopelessness press down on him, a crushing certainty that threatened to extinguish their flicker of hope. Yet, even in that moment of despair, something within him refused to yield. The air crackled with tension, and Elias's gaze locked onto Thorn, still hunched in his cell. The witness's eyes met his, a silent exchange that spoke volumes. Beneath the layers of exhaustion and fear, there was a spark of defiance, a glimmer of the unyielding spirit that defined them as humans. Elias drew a deep breath, his resolve hardening. They were outmatched, but they were not defeated. As long as they drew breath, they would fight. "All teams," Elias called, his voice resonating with newfound determination. "Remember why we're here. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for a galaxy that deserves better. Hold the line." With those words, the crew rallied, their spirits lifted by a shared purpose that transcended their individual fears. They were a small force in a vast cosmos, but they were united in their determination to make a stand. And as the battle raged on, the crew of the ship fought with a ferocity born of desperation and hope, a testament to the indomitable human spirit. They were outmatched, but they were not outdone. For in the darkest of times, they found the strength to persevere, driven by the knowledge that their actions could change the course of history. And in the heart of the storm, amidst the chaos and uncertainty, Elias Voss stood firm, his gaze fixed on the horizon, a beacon of hope in a galaxy on the brink. The corridors of the derelict space station groaned under the weight of disrepair, the distant hum of failing power systems lending an air of desolation. Captain Eli Vance moved through the dimly lit passage like a shadow, his senses honed to razor sharpness. Every creak of metal, every flicker of light was a potential threat. The mission had gone sideways the moment they touched down, and now the mercenary crew was scattered, lost within the labyrinthine structure of what was supposed to be an abandoned facility. "Eli, do you copy?" A whisper crackled through his earpiece. It was Lieutenant Mara Chen, her voice barely above a breath, each word pregnant with urgency. "Copy, Mara. What's your status?" Eli responded, keeping his voice low as he crouched behind a broken bulkhead, scanning the corridor ahead. "I've managed to regroup with Rourke and Jensen. We're holed up in the maintenance bay on level 3, but we've got company." Looks like those bastards are using the automated security drones against us. Eli cursed under his breath. The drones were supposed to be offline, part of the station's dormant and decaying infrastructure. But now, it seemed their unseen adversaries had managed to reanimate them. Sit tight, I'll make my way to you, but it might take a while. I'm still pinned down on level 5. Understood. We'll hold as long as we can, Mara replied, the static of the comm momentarily obscuring her words. Eli took a deep breath, steeling himself. He had to reach them, had to find a way to disable those drones. The mission was critical, and his team, his family, depended on him. Failure was not an option. He moved forward, every step a calculated risk. The corridors twisted and turned, a maddening maze designed to disorient. His mind raced, piecing together the fading memories of the station schematics, seeking shortcuts, alternate routes that might give him an edge. Suddenly, a clatter echoed from a side hallway. Eli froze, his heart pounding in his chest. A drone hovered into view, its sensors scanning the corridor with mechanical precision. Its metallic body gleamed in the dim light, a harbinger of implacable death. Eli's fingers tightened around his weapon. He had to act fast. The drone's sensors were sharp, but its processing was linear, predictable. He pulled a small EMP grenade from his belt, one of the few pieces of tech that might level the field, and lobbed it down the hallway. The grenade landed with a soft thunk, a blue pulse radiating outwards in a silent wave. The drone shuddered, its systems shorting out as it crashed to the floor with a satisfying clatter. Eli allowed himself a brief moment of triumph before pressing onwards, but the success was short-lived. The sound of more drones approaching from behind forced him onward at a desperate pace. He reached the stairwell, his breath ragged from exertion. As he descended, the reality of their predicament weighed heavily on him. This mission was supposed to be a straightforward retrieval. Get in, secure the data, and get out. Now they were fighting for their lives against an enemy unseen, a ghost in the machine. On level 4, he encountered another obstacle. The door to the maintenance shaft, his intended shortcut, was jammed, its access panel shattered. Eli swore under his breath. He needed to get creative. He pulled out his toolkit, fingers working quickly to splice the control wires. Sparks flew as the door begrudgingly hissed open, revealing a narrow shaft descending into darkness. The shaft was cramped, barely allowing him passage. Eli slid down the rungs, the metal cold against his palms. Below, he could hear the distant chatter of drones, the telltale clank of their movements echoing through the station's bowels. When he finally hit the floor of level 3, he could feel the oppressive tension in the air. He was close to the maintenance bay, but the endgame was still uncertain. He needed a plan, and fast. Eli, come in. Mara's voice cut through the static, more insistent now. We've got a problem. There's a team of hostiles moving in, trying to breach our position. Hold them off as best you can, Eli replied, his mind racing. He needed to even the odds. As he moved through the darkened corridors, he glanced at the junction box overhead. An idea sparked, a dangerous, reckless idea. The station's power grid was ancient, its systems interconnected in ways that could be exploited. If he could reroute the power, create a surge, he set to work, his hands moving swiftly, reconnecting circuits, overriding safeties. The station groaned in protest, lights flickering ominously. It was a gamble, but one that might give them the upper hand. Eli, whatever you're doing, do it fast, Mara's voice came again, edged with desperation. Almost there, Eli thought, as he made the final connection. The station's lights surged, a temporary blinding brilliance that overloaded the drone's sensors, causing them to convulse and crash. The brief victory was bittersweet. The lights flickered, threatening to die altogether. Eli sprinted towards the maintenance bay. Time was slipping through his fingers, and the cost of failure loomed large. He reached the bay just as Mara and her team were making their last stand. The hostiles, humanoid, clad in dark tactical gear, were pressing their advantage, a relentless tide against the weary mercenaries. Eli, Mara shouted, relief mingled with urgency as she caught sight of him. But there was no time for reunions. Eli dove into the fray, his weapon barking fire as he leveled the playing field. They fought with everything they had, a desperate dance of survival. Eli's mind worked in overdrive, calculating angles, predicting movements, adapting to the chaos around them. He saw Jensen take a hit, a cry of pain that twisted something deep within him. He fought harder, driven by the primal need to protect his own. The tide began to turn, but the cost was high. The hostiles fell back, retreating into the shadows, but not before one of them lobbed a grenade into the bay. Eli saw it land, time slowing as he lunged to intercept. The explosion was deafening, a wave of force that knocked him off his feet. As dust settled, Eli groaned, pain lancing through him. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid tang of burnt metal. Mara was already at his side, her face a mask of concern. "Eli, are you all right?" she asked, her voice strained. "I'll live," he managed, pushing himself up. Around them, the bay was in shambles, debris scattered like the remnants of a lost cause. They were alive, but the mission was far from over. They had lost too many good men, and the data they sought was still out of reach. And now, with reinforcements likely en route, their window of opportunity was closing fast. "We need to move," Eli said, determination hardening his voice. "The control center is our last hope. If we can reach it, we might be able to access the mainframe, find out who's behind this." Mara nodded, her resolve mirroring his. They were battered, bloodied, but still standing. And as long as they drew breath, they would fight. The path to the control center was fraught with danger, every corner a potential ambush. The station's systems were failing, the lights flickering like ghosts in the periphery. Each step was a reminder of their mortality, each breath a testament to their will. As they neared the center, the station shuddered violently, a metallic groan that resonated through the structure. Eli's heart sank. The power surge had destabilized the core, setting off a chain reaction. The clock was ticking down faster than he'd anticipated. They reached the control center, the door mercifully unguarded. Inside, the consoles were dark, the screens lifeless. Eli moved to the main terminal, his fingers flying over the keys in a desperate bid to awaken the dormant systems. Come on," he muttered, urging the technology to comply. Behind him, Mara and the others stood guard, their eyes scanning for any signs of pursuit. Finally, the screens flickered to life, the station's mainframe sluggishly responding to Eli's commands. He dug through the data, bypassing corrupted files and security protocols with a deftness born of necessity. The truth was buried here, he was sure of it. And then he found it, a log, hidden deep within the system, detailing unauthorized access, encrypted messages, a conspiracy that ran deeper than they had feared. "Eli, we've got movement." Mara's voice snapped him back to the present. The hostiles were regrouping, a final push to eliminate the intruders. With a final keystroke, Eli downloaded the data to a secure drive. "I've got it," he said, his voice grim. "But we're out of time. We need to get to the shuttle, now." Their retreat was a desperate race against time, the station's structural integrity rapidly failing. Explosions rocked the corridors, the floors buckling under the strain. Eli led the way, his mind a whirlwind of strategies and contingencies. They reached the docking bay, the shuttle tantalizingly close. But their escape was barred by a squad of hostiles, their weapons trained with deadly precision. It was a standoff, a moment suspended in time where the outcome hung by a thread. Eli's mind raced, seeking a way out. They were outgunned, outnumbered, but not out of options. He glanced at Mara, the unspoken bond between them crystallizing into a single, desperate plan. "On my mark," Eli whispered, his eyes never leaving the enemy. The moment stretched into eternity, then snapped. "Now," Eli shouted, springing into action. Mara and the others followed suit, their movements a blur of synchronized chaos. They fought with everything they had, a maelstrom of gunfire and grit. Eli's mind detached, analyzing, adapting, finding weaknesses to exploit. It was brutal, primal, a testament to the indomitable human spirit. And then, miraculously, they broke through. The path to the shuttle lay open, but not without cost. Jensen lay motionless, a life snuffed out amidst the carnage. Eli felt the loss, a hollow ache that threatened to consume him. But he pressed on, driven by purpose, by the promise of survival. They stumbled into the shuttle, Eli sealing the hatch as Mara fired up the engines. The bay doors opened to the void, the stars beckoning as they tore free from the dying station. As they sped into the abyss, Eli slumped into a seat, exhaustion crashing over him. They had survived, but at what cost? The data he clutched in his hand felt heavier than the worlds they had left behind. In the cold, unforgiving expanse of space, Eli understood the truth. They were alone, a solitary beacon against the darkness, and as the stars wheeled overhead, he knew their fight was far from over. The storm was coming, and they would face it, together, or die trying. The silence of space was an indifferent witness to the carnage unfolding just beyond the orbit of Zephyria, a sparse mining colony on the fringes of human territory. It was supposed to be a routine convoy escort mission for the Iron Wolves, a notorious band of human mercenaries who had carved a reputation through countless skirmishes across the galaxy. Yet here they were, their ships battered and broken, a smattering of debris dancing silently against the void. Captain Abigail, Abyss. Carter stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her last remaining cruiser, her eyes fixed on the tactical display that painted a grim picture. The opposing forces, a coalition of alien warlords under the banner of the Krishik Dominion, outnumbered them 3-1. Their sleek, obsidian ships prowled the edges of the battlefield, picking off stragglers with ruthless efficiency. Status on the convoy? Abyss demanded, her voice a steady anchor amidst the chaos. Lieutenant Marco, his face smeared with sweat and soot, glanced up from his console. 2 transports down, Captain. The Endeavor and Fortuna are holding position, but their shields are failing. Abyss cursed under her breath, her mind racing through possible maneuvers. The Dominion had sprung a trap, and it was a good one. They had underestimated the mercenaries, drawing them into a false sense of security before striking with overwhelming force. Now, the Iron Wolves were scattered, their once cohesive formation shattered like glass. Channel to all remaining wolves, Abyss ordered, her gaze steely. This isn't over until I say it is. Her words crackled through the intercom, reaching the ears of her scattered comrades. Across the battered hulls of their ships, eyes hardened, jaws set in determination. Human stubbornness, that unyielding refusal to surrender, was a flame that burned brightest in the darkest of times. Captain, Marco said, his voice cutting through the tension. The Dominion is regrouping for another pass. Abyss nodded, knowing what they had to do. They needed a miracle, but she wasn't about to leave her people to the mercy of the Dominion. Bring us about. We hit them head on. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, each knowing their role intimately. The Resolute shuddered as its engines roared to life, pushing the battered ship towards the advancing alien fleet. The odds were grim, but Abyss saw an opportunity, a weakness in their formation, a gap that could be exploited. Focus all firepower on the lead ship, she commanded, her voice a razor's edge. We break their spear. Elsewhere on the battlefield, the remaining Iron Wolves heard the orders and adjusted their courses. They were outnumbered, their ships on the brink of collapse, but they would fight to the last breath. That was the promise they made to each other. To fight, to protect, to survive. The Dominion ships closed in, their weapons charging, energy building to a crescendo. Abyss watched them through narrowed eyes, unblinking, as if daring them to come closer. In her mind, she counted the seconds, the beats of her heart echoing the countdown to collision. Fire! She shouted, and the Resolute unleashed a torrent of plasma and missiles, the air around them crackling with energy as the ship's systems strained against the overload. The lead Dominion cruiser took the brunt of the assault, its shields flickering before collapsing under the onslaught. Explosions rippled across its hull, the proud warship listing as its systems failed one by one. Abyss didn't waste a second. "All ships, engage now. Hit them with everything you have." Her voice was a rallying cry, and the surviving Iron Wolves answered with a savage fury. They surged forward, weaving between enemy fire with desperate agility, their own weapons blazing like stars in the night. Amidst the carnage, it was human ingenuity and spirit that held the line, refusing to yield. But the Dominion was relentless. Even as one of their ships faltered, another took its place, their formation tightening like a noose around the beleaguered mercenaries. The Krishik were confident in their victory, their commanders already anticipating the spoils of war. "Captain," Marco's voice trembled, a rare crack in his usually steady demeanor. "We're losing power to the shields. Hull integrity at 30%. Abyss clenched her fists, her mind a whirlwind of calculations and strategies. They were running out of time, out of options. She glanced at the tactical display, her eyes tracking the convoy as it struggled to stay intact. "We need to buy them more time," she said, more to herself than anyone else. Just a little more. Her thoughts raced, searching for a solution, a way to turn the tide. And then she saw it. An anomaly in the readings, a gravitational distortion just beyond the battlefield. A black hole, dormant and forgotten, its presence masked by the chaos of the fight. "Marco, I need a trajectory to that anomaly," she ordered, her voice cold and decisive. "We use it to slingshot around, catch them by surprise." The lieutenant's eyes widened in disbelief. It was a gamble, a desperate wager with everything on the line. But they were out of choices, and in that moment, he understood the plan. "Aye, Captain." Plotting course now, the Resolute veered sharply, engines straining as it altered its trajectory. The other Iron Wolves followed suit, their battered ships carving a new path through the debris-laden void. It was a bold move, one that defied conventional tactics, but it was quintessentially human, a testament to their refusal to be cornered. The Dominion ships pursued, their captains eager to end the chase. They were certain of their victory, assured by their superior numbers and firepower. But as the Iron Wolves approached the black hole, the gravitational forces began to take hold, accelerating their ships to impossible speeds. "Steady," Abyss whispered, her eyes fixed on the looming singularity. The ship groaned under the stress, metal protesting against the forces that threatened to tear it apart. And then, in a heart-stopping maneuver, they broke free. The Resolute swung around the black hole, its speed doubled by the gravitational slingshot. The Iron Wolves followed, their ships emerging on the far side of the battlefield with newfound momentum. The Dominion was caught off guard, their formation disrupted by the sudden reappearance of their prey. Abyss seized the moment, her voice ringing with authority. "All ships, converge on their command vessel. We take out their leader, the rest will falter." The Iron Wolves charged, a ragged phalanx of defiance and fury. Their weapons sang a song of defiance, a chorus of resistance against the impending darkness. The Dominion command ship, a behemoth of alien engineering, loomed ahead, its guns turning to meet the unexpected threat. Abyss gripped the edge of her console, her heart a steady drumbeat in the chaos. This was their chance, the turning point she had gambled everything on. The Dominion had underestimated them, and now, they would pay the price. As the Resolute closed in on the command ship, its weapons firing in a relentless barrage, Abyss knew they would either emerge victorious or be consigned to the annals of forgotten history. But as long as there was breath in her lungs, she would fight. "Captain," Marco shouted over the din, his voice fierce with determination. "We're breaking through their defenses." The command ship's shields flickered, then collapsed, its hull exposed to the merciless assault of the Iron Wolves. Explosions blossomed across its surface, great plumes of fire and smoke that heralded the beginning of its end. The Dominion fleet hesitated, their confidence shaken as their leader faltered. It was the opening abyss needed, the fracture in their armor that could be exploited. She pressed forward, driving the Resolute deeper into the fray. And then, in a moment that stretched into eternity, the command ship buckled. Its core, a volatile fusion reactor, went critical, a brilliant supernova that consumed the vessel in a cataclysmic eruption. The shockwave rippled outward, scattering the remaining Dominion ships like leaves in a storm. The Iron Wolves rallied, emboldened by their victory. They fell upon the disarrayed fleet with renewed vigor, their spirits unbroken, their resolve unyielding. It was a testament to human tenacity, a reminder that even in the darkest hour, they could find a way to stand and fight. Abyss took a breath, her heart still racing with adrenaline. The battle was not yet won, but the tide had turned. The Dominion was in retreat, their forces scattering before the relentless onslaught of the Iron Wolves. "Captain," Marco said, his voice filled with awe and disbelief. "We did it," Abyss nodded, a fierce pride swelling in her chest. "Yes, we did, but we're not done yet. We secure the convoy, then we drive them out of our space." The crew moved with renewed purpose, their exhaustion forgotten in the wake of their triumph. The Iron Wolves had faced the abyss and emerged, their spirit unbroken, their determination burning brighter than ever. In the aftermath of the battle, amidst the wreckage of ships and dreams, the humans stood victorious, a testament to their indomitable will. It was a victory wrung from the jaws of defeat, a reminder that even in the darkest hour, there was always hope. As the Resolute and its surviving allies turned to regroup, Abyss knew that they had not only survived but had sparked something greater, a resurgence that would ripple across the galaxy, a rallying cry for humanity against those who would see them broken. The Iron Wolves had their teeth buried deep, and they would not let go. The corridor stretched out before them like a yawning abyss, dimly lit and filled with the echoes of their footsteps. Every step was a drumbeat in the silence, a countdown to the inevitable confrontation. Sergeant Donnelly could feel it in his bones, the moment was coming. His team, hardened veterans of a dozen worlds, moved with a grace belied by their battle-worn exteriors. They had fought together long enough to move as one, needing no words to communicate their intent. At the head of the group, Lieutenant Sarah Kane paused, raising a fist to signal a halt. Her eyes were sharp, scanning the dimly lit passage for any hints of danger. The enemy was close. She could feel their presence, a cold prickle on the back of her neck. The alien mercenaries had been relentless, pressing their advantage with superior numbers and advanced technology. But the humans had something they didn't, a tenacity that bordered on insanity and a penchant for the unexpected. "Movement," Corporal Jenkins whispered, his voice barely more than a breath, his eyes fixed on the shadows ahead, where the corridor bent sharply to the left. A flicker of motion, gone almost before it registered. Kane nodded, signaling Donnelly to take point. He moved forward with a predator's stealth, senses straining. The air was heavy with tension, a taut wire ready to snap. As he rounded the corner, the scene unfolded before him. 4 heavily armed alien mercenaries in gleaming exosuits were stationed at an intersection. Their posture was relaxed, unaware of the humans lurking just beyond the bend. Donnelly suppressed a grim smile. Overconfidence, the Achilles heel of many an opponent. He slipped back to Kane, relaying the information with quick, precise gestures. She nodded, eyes narrowing with a predatory gleam. This was their chance. They had been on the defensive for too long, retreating and regrouping, but now they could seize the initiative. "Flash and clear," Kane ordered softly. The plan was simple. A sudden, overwhelming assault to disorient and eliminate the enemy quickly. Jenkins readied the flashbang, his fingers dancing over the controls. The rest of the squad readied their weapons, poised on the balls of their feet. Kane counted down with her fingers. 3, 2, 1. The flashbang arced through the air, a spinning harbinger of chaos. It exploded in a blinding flash of light and sound, turning the corridor into a cacophony of sensory overload. The aliens staggered, arms flailing as they struggled to regain their bearings. Donnelly and his team were on them in an instant, moving with lethal efficiency. Automatic rifles barked, the sharp staccato echoing down the corridor. The exo-armored aliens were tough, their armor able to withstand considerable punishment, but the humans knew where to aim. Joints, visors, exposed energy conduits, they were all weak points, and the humans exploited them with ruthless precision. The fight was brutal and short. In moments, the aliens were down, bodies crumpling to the floor in a tangled heap of limbs and metal. Donnelly wiped sweat from his brow, heart pounding in his chest. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Kane stepped forward, her gaze lingering on the fallen enemies. "They'll know we're coming now," she said, voice low but firm. There was no turning back. "We've stirred the hornet's nest," Donnelly agreed, nodding. "But they're still just hornets. We're not done yet." As they regrouped, Kane's comm crackled to life with a burst of static. It was the voice of Commander Taylor, their liaison and strategist back on the ship. "Kane, report. We've engaged the enemy," Kane replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "4 down, but they'll know we're here." "Understood," Taylor replied. "We've been analyzing their comms traffic. They're coordinating through a central hub, likely in the control center. If you can take it out, it'll throw them into disarray." Kane exchanged a glance with Donnelly. The control center was deep within the enemy compound, heavily guarded and fortified. It would be a tough nut to crack, but it was their best shot at gaining the upper hand. "We'll take it," she said, determination hardening her voice. "Donnelly, Jenkins, form up. We're moving out." The team pressed forward, moving deeper into the bowels of the enemy stronghold. Every step was a gamble, every corner a potential ambush, but they advanced with a grim resolve, knowing that this was the turning point. They had been underestimated, written off as a nuisance by a foe too arrogant to see the threat they posed. Suddenly, the corridor widened into a broad hallway lined with doors. Donnelly's instincts screamed at him to be cautious. He held up a hand, signaling a stop. "Wait," he murmured, peering into the gloom. A faint hum filled the air, a vibration thrumming through the walls. It was a sound he recognized, the hum of a generator, massive and powerful. It was close, just beyond one of these walls. Kane caught his eye, the same realization dawning on her. The power source for the base, perhaps even the control center itself. An opportunity too good to pass up. "Jenkins, see if you can get these doors open," Kane ordered, gesturing to the nearest panel. Jenkins moved swiftly, fingers flying over the control pad. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a room filled with computer terminals and flickering screens. "The heart of the beast." "Bingo," Jenkins muttered, a satisfied grin breaking his serious demeanor. Kane nodded, stepping into the room. "Set charges. We'll blow it on our way out." They moved quickly, placing explosives on critical systems with practiced efficiency. As they worked, Donnelly kept watch, ever alert for the telltale signs of their enemy. The comm crackled again, this time with a voice that was neither human nor friendly. It was a guttural snarl, the language unfamiliar but the intent clear. They were coming. Kane swore under her breath. "We're out of time. Fall back to the corridor." Now, they slipped from the room, retreating down the hallway as the first alien soldiers appeared, weapons at the ready. Jenkins triggered the charges with a flick of his wrist. A thunderous explosion rocked the base, a shockwave of sound and force that sent dust and debris cascading from the ceiling. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the corridor into darkness. The emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. It was chaos, the enemy thrown into confusion as systems blinked offline. "Go, go, go," Kane urged, her voice cutting through the din. They sprinted down the corridor, moving with a speed born of desperation and determination. Behind them, The aliens regrouped, firing blindly in the smoke-filled corridors. But the humans were already gone, ghosts in the machine, slipping away to fight another day. They regrouped in a maintenance tunnel, catching their breath in the shadows. The air was thick with tension, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. "That'll keep them busy," Donnelly said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. The destruction of the control hub was more than just a tactical victory, it was a statement of intent. They were no longer the hunted, they were the hunters. Kane nodded, her expression fierce. "We hit them where it hurts. Now they know we're not just another mercenary outfit. We're human, and we're not backing down." In the control center, where chaos reigned and screens flickered with static, the alien commanders snarled in frustration. They had underestimated the humans, viewing them as little more than primitives. But this was something else, a force of nature that couldn't be easily quantified or dismissed. The humans had shown their teeth, and they were sharp indeed. It was a warning, a declaration that this fight was far from over. Back in the maintenance tunnel, Kane and her team prepared for the next phase. They had gained a foothold, a chance to turn the tide. It was a dangerous gamble, but they were all in. As they moved out, Donnelly felt a surge of grim satisfaction. The aliens had thought them weak, outmatched, and outgunned. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. Humans didn't give up. They fought harder, smarter, with a ferocity that defied expectation. And now, as the enemy scrambled to regroup, they would learn the true meaning of humanity's strength. The fight was far from over, but the tide was turning. The humans were no longer on the defensive. They were here to win. The tunnels opened up into another wide corridor, this one leading deeper into the heart of the base. Kane led the way, determination etched into every line of her face. They had a mission, and they would see it through. Donnelly took point again, eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The base was a labyrinth, and every step felt like a descent into the unknown. But they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that their actions here could turn the tide of the entire campaign. A distant rumble echoed through the corridors, the sound of reinforcements moving to intercept them. They were coming, and they wouldn't stop until the humans were either captured or dead. But that didn't matter, not now, not when they were so close. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, a massive space filled with machinery and catwalks. The generator room, the heart of the base's power supply. Destroying this would cripple the enemy's operations, leaving them vulnerable. Kane signaled the team to spread out, taking positions around the room. They moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, each knowing exactly what to do. As they set the charges, the first of the alien soldiers appeared, their weapons blazing in the dim light. Donnelly returned fire, the sharp crack of his rifle cutting through the noise. The battle was fierce, a desperate struggle in the shadow of the humming generators. But the humans fought with a tenacity that bordered on madness, refusing to yield even as the odds stacked against them. Kane ducked behind a console, quickly assessing the situation. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but not outmatched. Not yet. Donnelly's voice cut through the chaos, a lifeline in the storm. "Charges are set. We need to move." Kane nodded, signaling the retreat. They fell back, laying down suppressive fire to cover their escape. The aliens pressed forward, relentless and furious, but they couldn't stem the tide. As they reached the corridor, Jenkins triggered the charges. The explosion was a deafening roar, a shockwave that tore through the chamber like a hurricane. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the base into darkness once more. In the confusion, the humans slipped away, vanishing into the shadows like ghosts. They were battered, exhausted, but triumphant. They had struck a blow, one that would reverberate through the enemy ranks and shift the balance of power. In the aftermath, as they regrouped in the safety of the tunnels, Kane allowed herself a small, grim smile. They had come here as mercenaries, but they were leaving as something more. They were human, and they were not to be underestimated. The alien commander watched the chaos unfold on the flickering screens, a growing realization dawning in his mind. These humans were not the simple, primitive creatures they had believed them to be. They were something else entirely, a force of nature, unpredictable and relentless. The fight was far from over, but the humans had shown their true strength. And the galaxy would never be the same. The dark void of space stretched endlessly around the battered mercenary ship, the Resolute Dawn Asterisk, as it drifted through the debris field that had once been the pride of the alien fleet known as the Zorkam. The ship's hull bore the scars of countless battles, and its engines sputtered with a defiance born from the relentless spirit of its human crew. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with tension, the silence punctuated only by the distant hum of machinery and the occasional crackle of the comm system. Captain Elena Torres stood at the bridge, her gaze fixed on the holographic display that hovered before her. The image was a chaotic swirl of red and blue dots, representing the remaining enemy vessels and the few allies still holding their ground. Her hand hovered over the console, her fingers itching to make the final move that would either secure their victory or spell their doom. "Status report," she commanded, her voice unwavering despite the turmoil within. Lieutenant Rajat Singh, the ship's tactical officer, glanced up from his station, his eyes sharp and alert. "Shields are at 30%, Captain. Energy reserves are critical. We're down to our last salvo of torpedoes." Torres nodded, her mind racing through the possibilities. The Zorkam had underestimated them, viewing humans as a primitive annoyance in their quest for galactic dominance. But they had learned, too late, that these mercenaries were not to be trifled with. Still, their own resources were nearly depleted, and one wrong move could end in disaster. "Any movement from the flagship?" she asked, her eyes narrowing at the largest red dot that hovered menacingly at the edge of the display. "Negative, Captain," replied Singh, a slight edge of triumph in his voice. "They've fallen back, possibly regrouping, but they're still in range of the ion cannon." A grim smile tugged at the corners of Torres's lips. The Zorkam flagship was the key. Taking it out would send the rest of the alien fleet into disarray, and with their forces already weakened, it would tip the scales decisively in humanity's favor. "Prepare the ion cannon," she ordered, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "We'll give them one hell of a farewell." The bridge crew moved with practiced precision, each member a cog in the well-oiled machine that was the Asterisk Resolute Dawn. Torres watched as the ion cannon charged, its energy readings climbing steadily. But even as the weapon powered up, her mind was elsewhere, on the young ensign who had sacrificed himself to save the ship during their last encounter, on the families left behind on Earth who counted on them to return. Failure was not an option. "Captain," came a voice from the comms, breaking her reverie. It was Dr. Noah Kim, the ship's chief engineer. "We've got a power fluctuation in the starboard nacelle. If we push the cannon too hard, we might blow the whole system." Torres's jaw clenched, her resolve hardening. "Understood. Divert all available power to the cannon. We'll make this shot count." Dr. Kim's hesitation was almost palpable, but she relented. "Aye, Captain. Rerouting power now." The lights flickered as systems across the ship shut down, the energy redirected to the cannon. On the display, the flagship loomed closer, its presence a dark shadow in the void. "Target locked," Singh announced, his voice steady. Torres took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving the display. "Fire!" The ion cannon unleashed its fury, a brilliant beam of energy lancing through the cold emptiness of space. It struck the Zorkam flagship with a cataclysmic force, a blinding explosion rippling across its hull. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the flagship erupted, debris scattering like a burst of fireworks. A cheer erupted on the bridge, the tension breaking like a dam. But Torres remained focused, her mind calculating the next move. "Focus fire on the remaining ships," she commanded, her voice cutting through the celebration. "We can't let up now." The crew responded with renewed vigor, their spirits buoyed by the destruction of the flagship. On the display, the blue dots surged forward, the human allies rallying to the assault. The Zorkam ships, once an insurmountable force, now faltered, their ranks breaking under the relentless onslaught. As the battle raged on, Torres's thoughts turned inward, to the fire that fueled humanity's indomitable spirit. The Zorkam had believed themselves invincible, their technology far superior. But they had not counted on the human heart, the fierce determination that refused to bow even in the face of overwhelming odds. "Captain, incoming transmission from the enemy flagship," called out Ensign Mia Carter from the comms station, her voice tinged with disbelief. Torres nodded, stepping forward as the transmission crackled to life. The image of a Zorkam commander appeared, his features a mix of alien elegance and cold disdain. But behind his eyes, Torres saw something new: fear. "You are formidable, humans," the commander admitted, his voice a grudging acknowledgement. "We misjudged your capabilities, but know this: our empire is vast. This defeat will only delay the inevitable." Torres met his gaze with unflinching resolve. "Your kind has underestimated us for the last time. Humanity will never submit. We fight for freedom, for a future where no one lives in fear of oppression. Remember that when you retreat to your empire." The commander's image flickered, his expression darkening. "This is not over. Not for us either," Torres replied, her voice carrying the weight of her conviction. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence once more. But this time, it was a silence filled with hope and determination. "Captain," Singh said, breaking the moment, "the remaining enemy ships are retreating. They're pulling back." A collective sigh of relief swept through the crew. Torres allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction before returning to the task at hand. "Let's finish this," she ordered, her voice ringing with authority. "We need to ensure they don't regroup." The Resolute Dawn surged forward, its weapons blazing as it pursued the retreating Zorkam ships. The alien fleet, now leaderless and demoralized, fell back in disarray, their once imposing formations shattered. As the last of the enemy ships fled into the void, Torres allowed herself to relax, the burden of command lifting from her shoulders. They had done it. Against all odds, they had turned the tide, proving once and for all that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. "Set course for Earth," she instructed, the words a balm to her weary soul. "Let's go home." The crew erupted in cheers, their spirits soaring. But even as they celebrated, Torres knew the fight was far from over. The Zorkam would regroup, would return with renewed vengeance. But when they did, humanity would be ready. For now, they had won a respite, a chance to rebuild and prepare for what lay ahead. And in that moment, as the stars stretched before them, Captain Elena Torres felt a fierce pride for the men and women who had stood with her, who had defied the odds and emerged victorious. The Resolute Dawn sailed through the expanse of space, a testament to human resilience and courage. And as they left the battlefield behind, Torres knew that they carried with them a message to the galaxy, that humanity would not be conquered, that they would fight for their place among the stars, and that they would triumph. The stars ahead seemed to burn a little brighter, each one a beacon of hope and determination. The Zorkam, in their arrogance, had thought humanity could be crushed. But they had underestimated the fire within the human spirit, a fire that, once kindled, could never be extinguished. As the ship sailed on, leaving the wreckage of battle in its wake, Captain Elena Torres stood at the helm, a fierce determination in her heart. They had won this battle, and many more would come, but they would face each challenge with the same unyielding resolve that had seen them through this day. And in the vast, endless reaches of the galaxy, humanity's light would shine ever brighter, a beacon of hope and defiance against the darkness. The Resolute Dawn continued its journey, a symbol of human excellence and triumph, as the crew prepared for the challenges ahead. They had proven their mettle, their courage, and their indomitable will. And as they set course for the future, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. For they were more than just a crew. They were a family, bound by the fire of their shared struggle and the strength of their resolve. And together, they would shape the destiny of the stars. As the ship sped towards the welcoming embrace of Earth, the crew of the Resolute Dawn prepared to celebrate their hard-won victory. They had achieved what many thought impossible, defying the odds and emerging victorious against a superior foe. Yet, even as they rejoiced, Captain Elena Torres knew that their true strength lay not in their technology or firepower, but in their unity, their courage, and their unwavering belief in the potential of humanity. For in the heart of every human burned a spark that, when kindled, could light the way through the darkest of times. And as long as that spark was nurtured, humanity would continue to rise, to challenge, and to conquer the stars themselves. The galaxy, vast and untamed, awaited their exploration, and with the stars as their guide, the crew of the Resolute Dawn would forge a future that shone with the brilliance of human spirit and determination. The battle had been won, the Zorkam had been repelled, and as the stars stretched out before them, Elena Torres knew with certainty that humanity's greatest triumphs were still to come. The silence after the final battle was deafening. The once chaotic battlefield now lay quiet, the charred remnants of machines and alien structures crumbling under the weight of their defeat. Captain Adrian Cole stood amidst the wreckage, her heart pounding in triumph and exhaustion. The victory belonged to humanity, but the cost was etched into her every bone. Beside her, Lieutenant Mark Vance surveyed the scene, his eyes shadowed by both joy and grief. "We did it, Captain," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But at what cost?" Adrian nodded, her gaze sweeping over the surviving members of her team. Each face bore the marks of battle, but more than that, they carried the burden of those who had fallen. Despite their losses, there was a new fire in their eyes, a determination forged in the crucible of conflict. Humanity had proven its mettle. The victory had not just been over the alien invaders but over the doubt that plagued humankind's place in the galaxy. For centuries, humans had been seen as the lesser species, mere specks in the vast cosmic tapestry. Yet today, they had shown that determination and ingenuity could defy the odds. Back at the command ship, the atmosphere was electric. Messages flooded in from allied planets, their leaders pledging newfound respect and cooperation. Humanity had shifted the balance of power, not through sheer force, but through unity and resilience. On the bridge, General Torres was receiving reports from all over the sector. The newly formed alliance was holding strong, bolstered by the human contribution. He looked at Adrian, his eyes reflecting both relief and respect. "You've changed the game, Cole. We've all changed it." Adrian allowed herself a brief smile. She thought of her family back home, of the hope this victory would bring to all those who had waited with bated breath. This was a new era, one where humanity was no longer a mere participant but a formidable force in the galaxy. As the debris of war settled, the mercenaries who had once fought for survival now stood as guardians of peace. They were no longer just soldiers, they were symbols of humanity's potential. Across the galaxy, the ripple effects of their victory spread. Once hostile factions now sought dialogue, inspired by humanity's tenacity. Trade routes opened, scientific collaborations started, and a new chapter in interstellar relations began. Adrian, Vance, and the rest of their team were hailed as heroes. The stories of their bravery galvanized a new generation, one that grew up believing in the strength of unity and the power of the human spirit. The captain turned to her crew one last time. "We've shown them who we are," she said, her voice steady with conviction. "And now, it's time to show ourselves what we can become." As the stars shimmered above, humanity stood poised on the brink of a new dawn, ready to carve their own destiny among the stars.